there's two different types of briskets. And what we're cooking today, and what I always cook in competition, are what are called whole briskets. The whole briskets have quite a bit of fat on them, so what I want to do in competition is I want to trim as much fat as I can off. I want to leave enough surface fat so that fat seasons the meat and flavors the meat with the fat and the moisture that's going to come out of the fat. But some of this fat cap right in here might be a couple of inches thick, and we don't want to just season the fat and cook the fat because we're going to have to trim that off when we're done. I like to buy good quality briskets. I don't think it's necessary to have USDA prime, but I do think a USDA choice, one of my favorite brands of brisket is what's called a certified Angus brisket. Now the real secret for competition brisket, when you're cooking the whole brisket and you want to turn in the whole brisket, is there's big pockets of fat that separate these two muscles. You can see there's one on this side and there's another one on this side. So now the trick is to go inside of there and cut that out. One of the ways I know that it's ready to go is when I can push down and I don't feel a lot of resistance. We want to eliminate as much of that fat from the middle so that when the judges see the piece of meat, they've got the meat from the top and the meat from the flat without too much fat in between. Whenever we're ready to turn this in, when we go to cut this, we don't have to do any outside trimming of the product and destroy any of the look we're going to get. I don't want to do much more trimming to that for competition, and that one's pretty much ready to be seasoned. The fire's burned down to pretty much just ashes, so now we're going to go ahead and close up the cooker and go ahead and let the cooker start to generate heat. We're going to be cooking at 225 degrees on this thermometer, and this one over here will end up about 200 degrees. We're going to season the briskets the exact same way we do the pork butts. And we're going to use the same rub. Real important to get all the edges on the brisket, because that rub's going to help seal it up. When the heat hits it, the rub's going to help seal it and keep a lot of the juice and moisture in. Now the briskets are a little different from the pork. We're going to cook those, and at about the 6 or 7 hour mark, we are going to flip the briskets upside down. We are going to cook the briskets fat side up, or the point side up. We've got the flat here, so this is going to be the bottom side. We're going to start them with the fat side up, and then in a cook-off time, it's usually right around midnight. About the time I'm thinking about going to bed, we'll usually take and baste or spray the briskets one more time, and then I'll flip them upside down. One of the things I like about adding cold charcoal onto hot is all that smoke that's being generated right now. It is a wonderful flavor, so I always add cold charcoal to hot. We've just added the charcoal, and we're going to open this back butterfly damper all the way. That's going to allow as much air as possible in there, because we do want to go ahead and let that charcoal catch as soon as possible, since we want to get it up to temperature within the next half hour. And these are ready to go on the cooker now. Our cooker's at 225 degrees over there on that door. Just like we said, we're going to put the larger brisket onto the competition cooker. And I like to start my briskets and pork butts up in what I'll call the top left of the cooker. And we're going to take the larger pork butt and do the same thing. And we're going to put them right up there. And they're going to be just fine like that for probably a good 2 or 3 hours until that rub sets up and starts to form a crust. We'll get some smoke working with adding some wood right now. One of the biggest mistakes that any amateur or backyard barbecuer makes is they make the mistake of cooking with too much wood. Yeah, I like these real small sticks of wood. They're perfect for adding flavor. They don't generate too much heat. We've got oak wood, apple wood, cherry, and hickory in there right now. And you can see they're already smoking. And we're going to start our basting procedure, which is really very simple. We fill up a spray bottle with apple juice, apple cider, whatever your favorite brand is. I wouldn't use anything that had any added sweetener to it. Apple juice is already plenty sweet enough. And we spray it. We're going to be spraying it probably every 2 hours up until we wrap the product. The reason that I like using apple juice, it's got a nice mild flavor. It's not going to add anything too aggressive to the flavor, but it does also have a nice sweetness. So the more we spray and the more the heat hits it, we're going to get some caramelization of the apple juice, and that's going to give that barbecue 3, 4, 5, 6 hours down the road. It's going to give us that nice dark caramelized look. As we can see, the rub is settled up. It's forming a little bit of a crust there. It's not going to run off. It's still a nice little bright red color. And now's when we're going to spray our apple juice on those. And at this point, we're going to be spraying every hour. And you just almost can't put too much on there. We're going to go ahead and check the briskets and pork now. They should up to about 165 to 170. It's going to be in the cooker, getting smoked, getting basted. Then at about 165 to 70, we're going to wrap it in aluminum foil and put it back on the cooker. The foil, what it does is it allows it to sort of pressure cook or cook in its own steam. It doesn't hurt the smoke flavor very much, but it definitely keeps the product from drying out, and it accelerates the cooking process. It would take a long time to get the brisket and the pork up to 190, 195 if we didn't wrap it. I try to leave my seams, or I always leave my seams pointing straight up. That way, you know, you're not going to have anything leaking out of the seams. And we want to wrap it as tight as we can. And then we're just going to put them right back on the cooker in the exact same spot. It's part of the science to barbecue that not a lot of people understand in the beginning, but if you want to be really good at barbecue, you have to use those internal meat thermometers to understand when your food is reaching what stages of tenderness and moisture and all that. The buzzer went off, therefore our brisket has to be at least 193. It says 194 right now. That thing can get annoying after a while. So we're going to go ahead and probe both of the pieces of meat and see where we're at. And we're up in the 195 to 200 range right there. This is where I like to use this big spatula. It's got enough weight to it that it's not going to bend. Also, by using the spatula, we don't run any chance of pulling it across the grates and breaking it open. There's a lot of juice in there that we might need, and we want to keep that steam in there and not lose any of that liquid. And we do the same thing with the brisket. By now, ideally, if we're to cook off, we've got about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes to when this has to be turned in. We want to let both the brisket and the pork sit out of the cooker for about at least an hour before we cut into them or work with them. That allows those juices. What we've done is we've cooked these to an internal temperature of 190 degrees plus. A lot of the juice and all has moved to the outside of the meat, and over the next hour we want a lot of that juice and natural juices in there to move back towards the center of the meat and be a little more consistent product. So we're going to let these sit just like this for about 45 minutes to an hour. Then we'll start unwrapping it and starting to get ready to prepare it. Okay, it's been about an hour, and we've got our brisket and pork butts that are done, and we're going to take them over to our carving station. Going to move the brisket over to the cutting board. One of the first things that I want to do is you want to make sure you understand which way the grain's running. Now, a whole brisket has the two different muscles, the flat muscle on the bottom and the point or cap on the top. Those grains do run, they don't run the same direction, so you're going to be cutting the wrong way on one of them. We want to cut the product against the grain with the flat. So we can see here from that cut that the grain on the flat is running this way. So we're going to want to cut perpendicular to that grain with our very first cut. I like to see for competition how nice my smoke ring is. I also like to see if I missed any of those pieces of fat, and as we can see from this one, we don't really have any of those bad pieces of fat. What I like to do is I like to slice the part that has more of the fat on it, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut these about 1/4 inch slice. The absolute best eating, remember, this is the flat, and this piece up here is the point. The absolute best eating on the entire brisket is up here in this area. This is what we in Kansas City and a lot of other places in the country call the burn ends. That came off the top of the brisket. We trim a little bit of fat that was there in the middle. And like I said before, now that the product's cooked, the fat is the softest part, and we just kind of go in through there and take a little more fat off. And then we can chop this up for our burn ends. And what I like to do in a presentation is we'll shingle up about 6 or 7 pieces of brisket, and then we'll put some burn ends right there in the front. The nice thing about the burn ends is you've got that nice black, and what I try to do is show as much of the black edges to the judges as we can. If they were looking at it in a container, we'd want them to see those black edges. Not only does it look pretty, it's also the best tasting part. And there's your brisket. You got your sliced brisket, which is primarily from the flat, and the burn ends from the top.